All right, y'all, so today we're going to go ahead and set up with the neural DSP Archetype Gojira again. This time we're going to work on a pop-punk tone with it because honestly it's extremely versatile. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, so if we go ahead and come over here to the Archetype plugin, I'm going to open that up. I'm going to turn it off again real quick because we can hear just my DI signal real quick. So you hear that along with the drums there, right? I'm gonna mute the drums for now. We'll come back to those. So you can hear just the DI. Can already hear some tuning issues there. Maybe I should have tuned a little bit better. But let's go ahead and start out with just the basic interface here of Archetype Gojira. So let's hear with everything set to just the default settings inside of the plugin. And honestly, that's not really bad at all. That sounds pretty great just as is, but we can definitely make it better. So let's go ahead and jump in here. So we'll go into the pedal interface here. I always turn on an overdrive pedal, especially since this is on a 7-string guitar tuned to drop A. And yes, drop A for pop punk. There's a lot of cool bands out there that have done it. So let's go ahead and pop on the overdrive. And again, without touching any of the knobs on the overdrive, let's see how it sounds. So you can hear how it immediately tightens it up a bit, right? So I'm gonna keep the distortion down, but I'm gonna crank up the level. And so let's go ahead and hit play and you can hear what it sounds like as I do that. So I don't know if you can hear that. If you're wearing headphones, it'll really help, but you can hear how that kind of took away a lot of that lower mid-range mud just by turning that knob, right? Super easy. Now I do tend to move the tone knob a little bit as well, but it really just depends. This is already sounding pretty bright through my headphones. I haven't listened to it through monitors yet, but through my headphones it sounds bright. Let's take a listen and see how it sounds if I do move that knob though. Okay, so I did actually like that a little bit brighter there. For this specific tone, I'm not going to touch any of these other pedals. I also did not do anything with the octave or the whammy pedal or anything like that. Next, I do go to the cab section and I mess with the cab section first before I start messing with the amp section at all. So I'm going to leave everything in the amp all at default settings still. I'm going to go over to the cab and I'm going to get the speakers sounding the way I want them before I start messing with the amp itself. So let's go ahead and hit play, and I'm going to audition. I'm going to leave the SM57 as the standard microphone. I always leave it right where it's at as well. But the second microphone is what I'm going to change around and see if we can get a better sound out of. So you'll see me turn off the dynamic 57, and then we're going to listen to just the second microphone and see what we can find with it. So I'm going to cycle through. So I do almost always tend to land on the dynamic 421. I do just love the way that it complements the SM57. So if I listen to them by themselves, so we have just the 421 here. And if we bring in the SM57. And now we'll bring out the 421. You'll hear it kind of change in volume a little bit, not too much, but you'll hear it. All right, so now take a listen. I'm going to actually move the microphone around and see what tonal changes we can make with this this combination of IRs. So I'm only going to move around the 421 again. I love where the SM57 sits at stock on the plugin. So we're going to move the 421 and see what it sounds like. So I think that's about where I want it. You might have seen that I increased the level there a little bit just because it was a little bit hard to hear that. When I do that, I'll sometimes bring down the level of the SM57, so let's do that real quick. Okay, so now you can hear that a little bit more dramatically to see the difference that that is making. So honestly, that sounds pretty sick as is. Let's hear it with the drums in some context here. so it's sounding pretty good, honestly. But let's go ahead and mute the drums. We do need to mess with the amp section a little bit. So the lows, honestly, for this, I leave where it's at, but the gain is what's a little bit too much for me for this pop-punk tone. So I'm gonna bring that gain down a little bit while I'm listening to it. Again, you never wanna just go with straight settings on these, just because of the fact that it may not actually work for what you're trying to achieve. So let's hit play and listen again. You can hear how much gain that amp actually has. Like, there's so much variation from all the way at the stock settings, which is pretty high up, bringing it down to what, 2 is what I brought it to on here. So, or I guess on a clock that would be like almost 10. But yeah, it sounds a lot better with lower gain on there. Still has enough drive and crunch to actually make it break up really nicely. Low, I am gonna leave alone. It sounds like it's got the perfect amount, especially since I don't have any bass guitar recorded for this track. Mids with this amp can be very touchy. It depends on the pickups that you're using if they're already very mid-centric. But let's go ahead and listen. I'll sweep the mid control, and then I'm gonna sweep the high control as well, because you'll see the highs have a pretty harshness the higher you go up. So. All right, so you heard the mid and high controls there. Honestly, I moved them very slightly up on the highs and very slightly down on the mids, and ended up liking right where it's at. Sometimes I do mess with the presence, but again, honestly, this is sounding really bright as it is. I don't think I need to mess with the presence, but just so you can hear it, let's go ahead and jump in there. Sorry for those of you that are wearing headphones, because I know that was a bit much. So on a lot of these, I tend to pull the master knob down just because it helps to bring down some of the saturation, helps to tighten the amp up a little bit. I don't think that I need it on this, and I don't want to have to boost the output. So I'm going to leave the master alone. It doesn't sound oversaturated for this sound, and you'll see what I mean in a second when I copy this over to the other guitar track. Last piece is the depth. So honestly, for a recording purpose, I usually tend to pull this down because I want a lot of the low end coming from the bass. So if we listen to this. So that either adds or removes that like woofy sound that you'd normally get from the cabinet. It sounds really cool when you're just jamming on a guitar. In a mix though, you'll probably end up removing it in EQ, so there's not a whole lot of sense in adding a ton of it right there on the amp section itself. So I would either leave it at the halfway point because it's very neutral there, or I would even pull it down a little bit. But for the sake of this, since I have it soloed, I do like how it sounds at about halfway. All right, now lastly, if you want to, you do have an EQ section here. If you don't want to get into EQ on a separate plugin or anything, there's actually a great option built straight into the plugin here. And so you can do things kind of simulating a high and low pass filter, for instance. So a high pass filter, you would bring down the 65 hertz. I mean, there's not a whole lot of information there that's audible in the guitar signal from 65 hertz and lower anyway, so no reason not to just drop that down. Again, usually I would have a separate plugin and I would do a high and low pass filter and an EQ plugin. For this purpose though, it's really cool to be able to do this in the standalone plugin. 16 kilohertz, again, same. Drop that down all the way. Let's go ahead and listen though. So there's a couple frequencies that sound kind of nasty in most guitar tones, especially high gain tones. Doesn't matter the amplifier. So let's go ahead and listen. I'm gonna bring down the 4K and see what kind of changes we can make there. Okay, now 2 kilohertz can either be great to boost or it's gonna make it sound like crap. So let's go ahead and boost that and see what it sounds like. Same thing with 8 kilohertz. Usually on an actual EQ plugin, I will do a high shelf at about the 8,000 mark and up with the low pass filter set at around 12 or 12.5. But let's hear how the plugin sounds just boosting this 8. All right, so you'll hear that gave it a little bit more air, a little bit more life. Now let's go ahead and flip this on or off. You're gonna notice hopefully some subtle changes here, especially if you have headphones on. subtle, but definitely enough to make a difference there in the final mixed guitar tone. Now again, this isn't a guitar tone I would put together for playing live. This is something I'd put together for making a recording. So that is it though. So if we go through and look at the pedal section again on here, we have the overdrive pedal, nothing else going on, right? If we go through and look at the amp section, we have some relatively normal settings based on the default settings that the amp had going in the first place. If we look at the EQ, very, very minor moves. You can go ham inside of here and make as many more moves as you want to. I tend to make more of those in the EQ plugin separately. And then lastly, we have the cab section. The IRs for the SM57, I did not move. It's standard default right where it was at. The 421 was changed from one of the condenser mics, and I did move it slightly to the outside of the cone. And then again, nothing in the reverb or delay. If this was a lead tone or something, sure, I would be jumping in there, but this is a rhythm tone. And that's it. So now let's go ahead and hear it with the drums, and then we're also going to listen to it copied over to another guitar track, and so we can hear things in stereo, because I did record 2 DIs on here. So here's that single soloed guitar with the drums, I should say. All right, and now let's go ahead and move over that plugin. I'm just gonna copy it. Logic is pretty easy with that. I'm gonna pan these guitars left and right. Now let's see what we've got. We'll unmute these. So that's it. That's my actual guitar tune that I'm going to use when I release this song. So look out for that on my socials soon. It's a really cool pop-punk track written on a 7-string guitar and drop A. So I hope this helps you though to figure out these neural DSP plugins. They really are awesome, honestly. They're affordable and they help you to build these guitar tones and just keep writing. You're not going to spend a ton of time editing and making these tones. You can make them super quickly and get back to what's important, which is writing, right? All right, I hope you all like this. If you do, please hit that cliched like and subscribe. And I appreciate y'all. Have a great rest of your day.